Welcome to Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast. I'm excited today to have as my success interview guest, Howard Behar. Mr. Behar is the renowned business leader, author, speaker, and business advisor. And for 21 years, Howard Behar led Starbucks domestic business as president of North America and president of Starbucks International. During his tenure, he participated in the growth of the company from only 28 stores to over 15,000 stores spanning 5 continents. He has written 2 books. The first is It's Not About the Coffee, Lessons on Leadership from Life at Starbucks. And his second book, The Magic Cup. Howard serves on the board of several for-profit and nonprofit organizations and travels the world speaking to leaders, corporations, and students. Howard lives in Seattle, Washington with his wife, Lynn, and enjoys spending time with his children and 6 grandchildren. Mr. Behar, welcome to Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast.
Thanks, TJ. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you as a guest. I've looked up to you for a lot of years now. I think what you've helped to create over there at Starbucks is amazing. And I think you have a lot to share here as we go through some of these questions. I'm looking forward to it. But before we get into that, could you give us a little bit of your background? Where did you grow up? What was your family life like? What were some changing, just some of your background that could help us get a better feel for you?
Sure. I grew up the son of 2 immigrants that came to Seattle in the early 1900s. My dad actually was born in 1895 and immigrated from Bulgaria in 1911 on his own as a 16-year-old. Can you imagine your 16-year-old kid leaving from, 5,000, 10,000 miles away and going out on his own? Well, that was my dad. Couldn't speak the language. Went to Broadway High School in Seattle, learned the language, went to work at the Pike Place Market, saved his pennies and nickels and dimes, and opened a mom-and-pop grocery store. And that's how our family survived, in this little tiny mom-and-pop grocery store. We didn't have a lot of money, but we had plenty of food. Some of it was brown, but it was still good to eat, And so that's how I grew up. And, from watching my dad get up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning to go get the produce to come back to his grocery store. And in those days, the store closed at 6. He was home by about 6:45 and ate his dinner in about 11 seconds and sat down in his chair and went to sleep, and that's how he worked for 50 years. And so I learned how to work from my father, and I also learned how to take care of people from my father. He was a very generous guy, and that kind of put me on the road to understanding what servant leadership was really about. I mean, those weren't words we used at the time, but so I was, my dad retired by the time I was about 12 years old. He was 50 when I was born, I guess I was about 15 years old, my brother and brother-in-law were in the home furnishings industry, and I ended up getting in the home furnishings industry. Talking to a guy that barely got out of high school, had a couple of years of community college, but never graduated college. And I just went to work, and I loved work because that's where I learned things. I wasn't a good student in school, but I was a great student in work, and I was interested. And when I was in my mid-20s, and I went to work for a company called Grand Tree Furniture Rental, and there was a guy named Jim Jensen there who became my mentor and my probably most significant mentor in life. And he was the one always pushing me to think about who I was and who I could be, and he was the one that had introduced me to, the Omega Institute and Edge Learning and Pacific Institute. And he was constantly pushing his people to learn more about how they ticked and how they could create habits, positive habits in their lives, and how they could influence their subconscious. And he was the one that changed my life. Up until that time, I was just a happy-go-lucky guy doing what I loved to do, smile on my face, but I never really thought about who I was, what my values were, what my mission in life was going to be, and how I could change my behavior. And so, that began a journey in the mid-'70s of becoming a whole Howard. And that whole Howard turned into a person that believed in servant leadership and believed in putting people first. And that's been my journey. And that's what I brought to Starbucks when I went there.
Well, when you were at Starbucks, or even over the years,
Yeah.
are there any like patterns or core habits that you have found that are vital in the makeup of an effective leader? What do you look for?
Um, well, the word authenticity, being
Mm,
being who they are and talking about who they are and what their values are. So nobody is guessing about that. And then the second thing is acting on those values. In other words, living up to what you say.
mm.
Uh, those two things matter. Being authentic, understanding who you are, communicating that effectively, and then living it. You know, it's the worst thing that could happen is when a leader talks out of one side of the mouth, out of their mouth, but behaves out of the other, and because it creates total distrust and the most important thing in any relationship is trust, and so those are the two things that I think are the most important.
Yeah, that's powerful. You've seen it a lot over the years. I've seen it in my time, which is when leaders have a little bit of say one thing and do something different, or have a little bit of hypocrisy. That destroys culture. It destroys trust. It destroys a high performing environment. And I too have seen that over and over and over.
Well, it doesn't destroy a culture, it just builds a different kind of culture.
Oh,
It builds
okay,
a cult
fair.
because it builds a culture of distrust, and so every organization has a culture, whether you're conscious about it or not. The key is
True.
being conscious about it and deciding what you want it to be, and then acting accordingly. So some leaders want abusive cultures, and that's how they treat their people. They think that abuse and fear it motivates people, but you and I know differently.
Correct. Yeah, we know that's only temporary, right? I mean,
Yeah, right.
short-lived. Okay, that's really cool. So, you just mentioned something about servant leadership, and that's one philosophy. Obviously, those listening to this podcast and that follow me know this, that we are all about servant leadership here, and you've been a good example of that in putting people first. And one of the challenges is some leaders or managers don't see the practicality and concreteness of putting a strong emphasis on the people part of the business. What would you say to someone who is head focused solely on the numbers and the profits, yet neglect to nurture their people?
I would say, what are you doing at home? I'd ask a question, right? Do you think that focusing only on the numbers, only on the income in your family is what makes a great family, and not focusing on the relationships between you and your significant other or spouse or your kids? That doesn't make a difference? Of course it does. There is no difference between a family and a business, a nonprofit. They're all the same. One organization is the same as another, and a family is an organization of people
Mm-hmm.
that came together, maybe not. Your kids certainly probably didn't choose you, although there's some people that believe that you do.
Right.
you know, uh, but so what do they need from you? Encouragement, love, caring, right? Guidance. They need to be treated as human beings, and that's exactly what needs to happen in an organization. And that's what servant leadership is all about. Is that leaders, parents, whatever you want to call us, right? Our job is to help our people, our children, achieve their goals in their lives while helping the family or helping the business or the nonprofit organization achieve its goals. But leaders are there to serve. Parents are there to serve, not be served.
I love that. That's powerful stuff. Wow. Okay, so which brings up another thought. I know that you've brought in, when you were at Starbucks, you brought in a lot of training programs and so forth. One of those programs was of a gentleman you and I both know, whose name was Bob Moad. He's since passed away, but Bob Moad had a program called Increasing Human Effectiveness, which is now called Maximizing Human Performance. What did you find? I'm curious because we bring obviously our training programs into organizations, and there are many other organizations that bring in different training programs. What did you
Sure.
find at Starbucks? Because I know that with our program, thousands of Starbucks employees went through our program, and it was you that brought it in. What did you find as a value by bringing in these kinds of trainings?
Well, it created, number one, it created common language. A common language about how we were going to work together, how we treated each other, how we accomplished things. And that, that made a huge difference in our organization. But the other things were about, increasing human effectiveness, was really also about servant leadership.
Mm-hmm.
It was about how we worked together, how we served each other, how we served those human beings we call customers. It all fit together, and it had a huge effect on the organization. Matter of fact, I don't think they've used those words in a long time, but it still affects the culture of Starbucks, and I think it's been one of the key things in achieving results. At the end of the day, performance counts, right. But it's how you get the performance that really counts, and that's what Moad's work was about, and the work that you do is about. Is really it's about achieving results with human beings, not achieving results on the back of human beings.
That's wonderful. Okay, so I was watching, I don't remember what video it was. You were presenting at some conference, and the gentleman who was interviewing you was saying, what kind of metrics did you use or quantifiable data to justify providing these kinds of training and tools? And did you use any metrics? Did you see if there was any benefits as a result of this, or was it more of a feeling?
No, we didn't take it and do a class and then start measuring what took place. Mm-hmm. It's like measuring, how do you measure love? Right? Seriously.
Right.
So your wife comes home at night and she says, I'm not happy in this marriage. How much data do you need?
That's good.
Right? If your people aren't happy and your people aren't feeling like they're appreciated, if your people don't know what the purpose of the organization is, if your people don't know what you're trying to achieve, then I don't care what kind of data you get. And I know this world today is so data driven, and I worry about it because, it's most of the things about human beings are how we feel.
Right. It's true.
And do I get up in the morning and am I excited to go to work? Am I excited to be married to this person that sleeps across the bed from me? Am I excited to see my kids? Am I excited to see my dogs this morning? What's my life like? And I guess you could probably measure it with some kind of instrument, but is that really what we're trying to do? And when you listen, when you listen with your heart, when you listen with your ears, that's how you measure.
Love it. And we in our business, and you've seen it, is you have people looking for those data points, but in the end, it's about creating that culture, that feeling, people feeling validated, and a number of different things inside the organization. It's just great that you see it that way. And of the many organizations that we've served, though, like you, those visionaries, leaders that see that, you can walk in and you can feel the culture that those organizations.
Yeah, and that's what it's about. And then that turns into results.
It does.
I'm not sitting here saying, well, hey, you don't need to worry about performance. Results don't matter. Numbers don't matter. Of course they do. They do. Mm-hmm. But it's how you get to them that matters most. And when you get to them with treating your people with respect and dignity, with loving them, and I mean loving them, right? We don't use that word much in business, but we love them as human beings, not in the familiar sense of the word, but in the human sense of the word, that they are human beings and worthy of our love and respect.
I love that. I interviewed a number of months ago Robert Spector, who wrote the book, The Nordstrom Way. And,
and he's great guy.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he is. And he said a great thing. He said, love wins. That's one of his kind of pillars, right? Love wins. Yeah. And you're right. We don't talk about it, but we can definitely show more care, right? We can be more respectful. We can listen better. Anyway. Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed when I was doing a little bit of research, and I don't know if I quite understand this, you call organizations a social product. Does that ring a bell to you?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Well, I was referring to Starbucks. That we weren't in the coffee business serving people. We were in the people business serving coffee.
Hmm.
And when I say people business, I'm not just talking about the people that worked at Starbucks. I'm talking about the people we served, those human beings that we served. And if you think about organizations, it's all about human interaction, right? And great human interaction begets great results. There's just no way around it. And so I looked at Starbucks. From the minute I got there, I realized that we were in the business of filling souls, not in the business of filling bellies, and that's a social product. It's about human beings, and that's what makes Starbucks work. And I think that it makes all organizations work. I don't care if you're selling widgets, right? A widget, somebody makes a widget, in a factory, and that widget gets sold to a printing press company, and that printing press company sells it to a publisher, and a publisher produces a magazine or newspaper. And that widget has to be in that piece of equipment. So the person that makes that widget affects the outcome of that social product, that product that goes to another human being to inform or entertain them. That's the magazine or newspaper. And so even the supposedly lowly widget maker affects people's lives. And one of the problems is that we have a hard time making those complex connections, but they're always there because we only have one role in life, and that's to serve human beings. I don't care what it is you do. It doesn't make any difference. Lawyer, doctor, widget maker, coffee seller, architect, engineer, truck driver, right? We're all there to serve somebody. And that's what I mean when I talk about social product. It's all that.
That's great. That's great. By the way, you did mention, I noticed a number of times you've mentioned as I've researched you, you don't like the term asset, that your people,
I hate that term.
that your people are your greatest asset.
Yeah, people are not assets. Trucks are assets, computers are assets, buildings are assets. You own assets. You don't own people. Right. Assets pretty much always give you what you expect as long as you maintain them and take care of them. Put oil in the truck and, fuel in whatever you're doing, right? When you go to turn that key, it turns on. People never give you what you expect. And the mark of a great leader is understanding that and being okay with that. And, I have never heard one leader complain when one of their salespeople came in out of the blue and brought in $1 million order. That they didn't expect it, right? But it certainly was out of their expectations, but they're certainly happy about it. But we sure hate when that same salesperson loses an order. But that's the way life is, right? Things come, things go, and great leaders understand that, and they can deal with the ambiguities of life and the ambiguities of business.
Right, which presupposes something else is regarding self-talk is leaders must know themselves. You've talked about this at length as you call it a board of, we all have a board of directors over our head. Would you maybe touch on that? Your board, one of your members is talking to you right now as I'm talking to you. I have about 8 board members, and they sit on my shoulders, and they represent different me's, different part of my subconscious, all trying to influence me. So I have, one board member that when I give a good speech and I get a standing ovation, that board member saying, "Hey, Howard, God, you're fantastic." And then there's another one that says, "Hey, buddy, don't get too caught up with yourself. You're not that good," Right. And they're managing me all the time. And I have to learn, I think in order to have a fulfilling life, you have to really learn how to effectively manage that board of directors. Because most people aren't aware that that's even going on. They never learn how to manage it. So they're constantly responding to stimulus instead of learning to manage their response.
And that's why I think it's so important to learn to manage that board. And because, that board is constantly influencing you based on, what it believes about you.
Totally.
And,
Yeah.
and so, I have 8 core values that I live my life by. The first one is honesty. Well, I have board members that are encouraging me to be dishonest at times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have that one that says, hey, wait a minute, Howard, your first core value is honesty, and that one always wins out with me because I've given it the power to do that. It isn't that I've tried to take power away from the other ones, because what I've learned is if you try to take power away from the other ones, they come after you with a vengeance. I just say to them, I don't have time for you right now.
Yeah, that's good.
And I give time to the positive influence.
Was this your goal in terms of when you think about the thousands of employees that Starbucks has? Was this your goal with bringing in some of these other like our training programs and so forth to help give the tools to these people that they can learn to manage their thinking?
Absolutely. That's what it's about. Look, there's this little equation that I like to, I think all organizations operate by. You grow the people. So you grow your children. You help them become better. You grow your partners or employees that we call partners at Starbucks. You help them to become better human beings. How to manage their own lives. How to work together with other people. How to treat themselves with love and respect, and treat others with the same love and respect. And when you do that, right, then they can grow. And so what we try to do is give them the tools to do that. And that's what your work is about. What Moed's work was about. And that's what we try to do. And when you do that, then they accomplish the results. So you grow the people grow the organization, they pass that on to others, then the organization grows the business.
And because of that, because you're nurturing them and breathing life into them in various ways, right, they're giving more on the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Anyway, it does. It impacts the bottom line. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I was at Hill Air Force, Bob Moad, when we were writing the book, The Secret of the Slight Edge, he had on the books a speaking engagement down at Hill Air Force Base. And he said, obviously, TJ, this is toward the end of his time, but he says he couldn't move his body at the time. And he said, obviously, I can't go do that speaking engagement. But Ernie Parada asked if you would come and do the training down at Hill Air Force Base. We were going to put 800 people through our training program. And I remember as I was doing that training down there, one of the colonels, a full-fledged colonel that happened to be female as well, which was awesome. We were talking about self-talk. We were talking about being open to new ideas and creating a culture where we're all open to new ideas and talking with each other and coming up with the best resources and not taking offense, but let's figure out what works best and let's work as a team, that kind of a thing. And I remember she came up to me during one of the breaks, and this is a question about Howard Schultz, but she came up to me and she said, after 9/11, I was, assigned to serve at CENTCOM down in Florida. And she said, I worked for a 4-star general down there that did exactly what you're talking about, TJ. I said, hey, could you explain? She goes, every time we had a new idea for something, anything, and we brought it to this 4-star general, his immediate response was, quote, let's see how we can make that work. And she said, it was just the feeling that he had a kind of an open door policy to new ideas. It didn't mean that he accepted all the ideas, or there were sometimes he would send us away to go answer these few questions, and then we would realize on our own that idea wouldn't work. But at least he was open. And I heard you speaking about Howard Schultz, that you said that Howard Schultz was willing to try new things. If it was ethical, legal, and moral, he would give it a try. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's what made Starbucks go. We weren't afraid of failure. We would try anything as long as, it had to fit within context.
Sure.
But we were willing to try anything. and to see whether it worked. And, I mean, it was not like we sat around and we had the ideas. You know who had the ideas? Our people.
Ooh.
And we took the ideas from our people, and I always considered myself an alchemist. I'm no brilliant creative mind, but what I was really good at was listening to others and listening to people and putting together disparate ideas into into a whole, and then making it work. And I could be walking down the street and see something and say, wait a minute, that might fit with that, and that's what we were about at Starbucks is trying things, making it work. Not being afraid of having something fail.
Well, is it fair to say that a lot of that, creating that culture where people felt like they could share ideas? Because I go into organizations where people oftentimes don't feel like they can share ideas, or they'll be shut down, or they'll be viewed as questioning the leadership. But it sounds like, correct me if, or add to, was this kind of the culture that you and the leadership team created that allowed the whole organization to breathe openly like that? I mean,
yeah, I mean, even at its best, it's hard because people bring fear with them when they come into an organization. And, getting rid of that fear is difficult. And then, then we make our mistakes and we create fear all over again, by saying something, maybe that we shouldn't have said, or somebody taking it the wrong way. But yeah, that's what we were trying to create. We were trying to create this place that we could try things that, if somebody failed, it was okay. And we didn't always do that. It was Starbucks is certainly not a perfect organization, but most of the time we did.
Sure. So what's your philosophy on making mistakes then? Because one of the things that we teach inside organizations, right, is that leaders have got to be okay with some mistakes. We don't want repeated mistakes. But what's your thought about making mistakes on?
Well, I have never met one leader that didn't make a lot of mistakes, ever, right? But somehow when we get into leadership positions, we forget that we did, and that's a danger, because organizations, in order to grow, in order to get better, have to be making mistakes, and sometimes you do make the same mistake a few times. Maybe it's by different people because they didn't get a chance to learn the lesson because we weren't good at teaching it. But, you can love your people, and sometimes you let money, the drive for results get in the way. And, and that comes from when somebody sometimes makes a mistake and it costs the organization money. And you got to be able to suck it up and sit there and say, okay, what did we learn? That's the question. What did you learn? Here's what I learned. It's not just what they learned, it's what did you learn? Because if a mistake is made, particularly a serious mistake, who owns that? They don't own it. You own it.
Right. And that oftentimes creates the fear, right? Because they own.
Yeah, don't want to fail. And leaders at all levels, they don't want to have to look in the mirror and say, hey, I screwed up. But they do. And if they can look at the mirror as a leader, if you can look in the mirror as a leader and say, hey, I screwed up, then you're a lot more willing to look at somebody else's mistake and say, that's okay. We'll do better next time.
Okay, that leads me to a personal question then. When you scan over your whole life, were there any spectacular failures or mistakes that you made that helped propel you to future success?
Oh, yeah, constant.
Yeah.
I'll give you a leadership mistake. So I was about 26 years old, and I was leading a team, and on the team were half the team were females, and one day one of the people that reported me, who happened to be a woman, came into my office, and she sat down in front of me, on my desk across from me, and just started bawling, just started crying. And God, I didn't know what to do. But I got up front of the table, I grabbed a box of Kleenex, and I came around, and I took a Kleenex, and I gave it to her, and I put my arm around her and said, it'll be okay. And I thought she was going to rip my head off. And I just stood back, I said, what, and what I realized is she wasn't sad, she was angry. And it was the first time I realized that all human beings come at emotions differently. And women sometimes cry when they're angry.
Mm.
You know, they're not crying because they're sad, and it's being aware. And so from that day forward, I realized I needed to ask questions before I responded. You know, I needed to say, "What's going on? Okay, how come what's going on with you right now?" And let them tell me what it's. And if they're sad about something, I may show a different kind of response than if they're angry about something.
Correct.
But she felt that I was putting her down, that I was being this patriarch coming around, right, trying to hug her. Okay, honey, that'll be okay, you know.
Right.
And that's not what she needed to me at the time. And you know something, that has not only served me well in business, it served me well at home too.
Yeah. You know, I think
sometimes people just want an ear. They don't need a response.
Well, that's a good point. I think my wife has said that once or twice.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. And probably your kids too.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you know what? I try to be a good listener to my kids. Anyway, that's a whole separate thing. But you know, they've taught me as much as I think I've taught them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I respect them immensely. You know, you think about failures. You just triggered a thought. I don't think I've ever shared this before. A failure that I had back in the day in 1999 when I was working for 1 year. I worked with Tony Robbins.
Yeah.
And I was going around the country doing all these presentations. I mean, in 1 year I did 240 presentations, keynote speeches. And it was really cool. I got a lot of learning from that. But one of the big aha moments I got talking about women and being careful is I was speaking to a group in Denver of 400 women, and I was in my 20s. And I remember I asked a question, and somebody said something around they were 40 years old, and I came back with something about how that implied, and what I said, I don't even remember what I said, but it implied that I had said that they were old. And I remember in that moment of speaking, that room of 400 ladies, in my response, don't really remember what it was, but just that I implied that 40 was old. The room became dead silent. And they started to stare at me. They just stared at me. And I remember in my mind, as quick as I could on stage, I backtracked and I thought, what did I say that just created this huge shift in spirit, right? And I remember I realized I had inferred something that I didn't mean to infer. And I remember I tried to walk it back and say, well, this is what I meant and blah, blah, blah. And this lady in the back of the room stood up and she said, hey, TJ, you might as well stop talking about it because you're digging yourself a bigger hole. And so I learned that you do have to be mindful. You know, one thing you said in some of the things that I reviewed about you is you repeatedly say, be thoughtful, be thoughtful. And we need to be more thoughtful. We're in 24-hour news cycles. Everybody's giving their opinions online and offline. I think there's a place to be more thoughtful and caring and realize how something might come across. Anyway, that's just a little thought that you gave me right there.
Yeah, well, it's true. It's, you know, words matter. You know, they matter.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is why we have to be thoughtful of what we say. Nobody's going to be perfect. None of us. You know, we also have to be forgiving, you know, which we're not too forgiving right now, you know.
You're right.
But we need to be thoughtful about what we say. And better to ask a question than make a statement. Better to ask somebody, what do you mean? Or is this something that is correct, what I'm saying, or is it not? You know.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good advice. That's wisdom right there. Okay. What advice would you give someone? I know that you speak at universities and so forth. What advice would you give someone just going into the business world? I'm a free enterprise system, capitalist believer in our system here in the United States. But what advice would you give people just starting out in the business world?
Figure out who you are first. Your first job before you go into the business world is figure out who you are, what your 8 to 10 core values are. In other words, and then take those 8 to 10 core values and define what they mean to you. You know, how do they inform the decisions and actions you make in your life? And then practice them and try to live by them. Then write out a mission statement for your life. What is it you want to leave behind? And even young people, they struggle with this because, well, I'm 21. What are you talking about what I want to leave behind? Look, there's never a good time or a bad time to start. It's doing it now. It's figure out, okay, what is it that you think about? You know, what do you want to be remembered for? What would you like people to say about you? And then write out a statement of how you want to live your life. You know, I have my 6 P's, you know, purpose, passion, persistence, patience, performance, and people, you know, and what is it? How do you want to live your life? And so what I encourage people to do is create a picture in words of who they are. And then you use that to drive themselves. I did it over 40 years ago. I still carry it with me today. No matter where I go, it's either on my iPad, my iPhone, or it's on a piece of paper in my briefcase.
Right.
And you'd say, well, God, after 40 years, can't you just remember it? I do, but the point being is that human beings are incredibly fragile. And when in the heat of the battle, right, we forget. And, you know, there's what's that old saying? There are no stressful situations, only stressful responses. And so I'm trying to manage any chance of those stressful responses. And so that's why I keep it with me. And I want to be Howard. And this is who I've said Howard is. And I'm not perfect. I'm not always Howard. But I try to live myself most of the time by that. And if you can be clear about all that stuff, then when you go into the business world or you go to work in a nonprofit or whatever you're going to do, then you have better chance of leading a fulfilling life. And what I mean by fulfillment is that it's not about happiness. Just about happiness is part of fulfillment, but you learn how to deal with the disappointments, with the anger, with the fear, with the pain, the sorrow, as well as the happiness, and as well as the accomplishments that you make. And that's what you want to do. So figure out who you are first and try to live up to that. And when you do that, then people will know the authentic you, and they will respond positively to that.
That's really good. That's really good. So you brought up 2 thoughts here. Number one, I'm going to put a little plug, and it'd be a plug for you, I'm sure, too. But our training program, but maximizing human performance, that's one of the things we do is we actually take existing organizations in and help people discover what their values are, how their values relate to their life, what goals are they setting? Are their goals and their values aligned? Right? We take them through this. So that's a way to start the business world. But I think you would agree that it's also something leaders can do with existing people that are in the business world and already in business, right?
Oh, yeah. There's never a bad time to start. You know, I've talked to 80-year-old people who've never thought about this. And I've encouraged them that why not? Do it at 80. If you've never done it, so what? You can do it now.
Yeah.
You know, but I wish we did more of this work with 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds.
In the school systems, right?
In the school systems, you know.
Yeah, totally. Because that's the time where we're really shaping beliefs, and unfortunately, many people don't come from homes where had the experience that your children had or my children have, where across the dinner room table we're talking about these concepts. It's just, it's amazing. Many people don't come from that. And so the resources that are out there and the more organizations that can provide it to people, wow, how will that impact the bottom line? Okay. You brought up another thing, happiness and fulfillment. You just talked about it, but you know, you said in something I saw that happiness by itself is fleeting. In the end, it's not just happiness that you want. You ultimately want fulfillment.
Right. And fulfillment involves everything in life. You know, it's the pain, happiness, discomfort, pleasure, disappointment, discouragement, enjoyment, love, as you say. You know, all those things matter, and they make a whole human being. what lessons do we really learn in life when if we're constantly hitting the ball out of the park, do you really learn about, about when you don't? Are you really able to deal with the times when you're striking out? And you got to be able to deal with both sides of that.
Yeah.
And that's what makes a whole person.
Well,
and then that's what makes a great leader, because they understand these are the things that all human beings go through.
Right. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. And you can't know happiness without pain, and you can't.
No,
right?
It's impossible.
Right. It's a balance through life. So, take the discomfort, take the disappointment, take the discouragement, the enjoyment and love, mix it all together, and just be the best you can do is what I'm hearing from you. Okay. All right. Here's an interesting question for you as I get down my list here of questions. Do you have any morning rituals or routines that you do on a daily basis that's helped you be effective on a daily basis? Anything in particular?
Well, from time to time, it used to be all the time that I meditated.
Oh.
First thing I got up in the morning, first thing I'd take, after I was awake, I'd take 10, 15 minutes and meditate. I haven't done so much of that lately. So,
Sure.
But I have the first thing now is I get up and I have my own little meditation. It's my two little puppies that are so excited to see me.
Yeah.
They're just bouncing around. They're all over my face. You cannot help but feel good when that happens.
Totally.
It just gives me energy like no other energy. Yeah, and then I have some specific foods that I eat. I believe in eating protein in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good. I'll eat some complex carbohydrates, but no sweets.
Yep.
No, none of those kind of carbohydrates. Because I found that the protein gives me the energy that I need to get going. So that's a little habit that I just developed in myself. And then I like to take a walk.
That's good.
Not even a long walk, just a short walk, just to get that blood flowing.
That's really good. Okay, cool. What's your mission today? You've got your books out there.
I want to change the world. I want to change how people lead. I'd like to see it's my life's work. My life's work is to get leaders to understand that they're there to serve, and that if they serve well enough, they will accomplish everything and more than they thought possible. And if they don't, then they're going to struggle, and their people are going to struggle. And so, I go around the world talking about servant leadership and about how, and not just in the terms of servant leadership, but basically, understanding that treating people with respect and dignity, helping people to be all they can be, using that little equation, grow the people, help your people to become better human beings. They will grow the organization, and the organization will grow the business or the nonprofit, whatever it happens to be. And so that's what I'm out trying to do, and I'm not going to stop until they put that last nail in.
Oh, that's really cool. So I would invite everybody who listened to this, thank you for listening to it, first of all, but make sure that you study up on Mr. Behar. He's got great stuff out there. His books are wonderful. Get your copy today. One thing that as I've researched you and got to know you and visited with you in this interview, one thing that stands out to me, Howard, is that you are a whole human being. I'm not suggesting that you're perfect, because no one is, but I can tell that you value that, and you brought up the whole human being concept a number of times, and I can sense that you are that kind of person. And so it's been an honor to visit with you this last few minutes.
Well, thanks, TJ. I appreciate it, and it's great to talk with a brother on the journey, and we are on the journey. So keep going. You're a young guy. You're going to do it for a long time. Me, not so much.
No, I get you. And I love doing it. So this is just a pleasure. And it's a pleasure to be able to interview folks like you, leaders, titans in the world and in the business, and others like you. It's just really a pleasure. So I thank you for the time.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right. Thanks.